Hi everyone, this is Grace and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to learn how to decorate these adorable Thanksgiving minis. So first up is this turkey platter, and honestly, this turkey platter intimidated me. It seemed like it had so many different pieces, but when you break it down, it's really not as hard as it looks. So first up, I am outlining and flooding the platter for the turkey. I'm using a pretty thick single consistency outline and flood for this entire set. And that is predominantly because these are minis. Do yourself a favor, do not do a two consistency outline and flood on minis. I just can't even imagine. It's just going to be so much easier with a single consistency. And since it is a lot smaller, you're going to want to do a thicker flood to reduce the chance that it's going to crater on you. And craters happen in all royal icing. It's when the center dips in a little bit, and it's just more pronounced on a smaller surface than it is on a larger surface. So here for this turkey leg end, I just want to point out I'm doing piping consistency here to just support the end of it, and then I'm going on top with a flood consistency. And honestly, I really could have used that piping consistency to do the entire turkey leg. And you just need to use a scribe then to help kind of jiggle it out. But this is what I did for this one, and here we are. So I'm using a scribe to help the flood melt into the piping, so you'd never know they were two different consistencies. And here, this is a flood consistency. Now, I could have used the piping consistency and done some pressure piping action, which is just another option. And I had a tiny bit of cratering, so that's why I thought, should have used the piping consistency. But I digress. This here is a medium peak piping consistency, and I'm just adding some little accents on the bottom. I don't really know what they are. Is this lettuce? What are the yellow things? I don't know. Cranberries. I'm guessing these are cranberries. It's just cute. It's just fun. Don't think too hard. I like the accent. Here we are. This is the turkey platter. So first cookie. Up next, we have the gravy boat. Again, I'm doing a single consistency outline and flood here. Super proud. How you're going to get these beautiful curved lines is to make sure that you are pulling your bag above the cookie and you're really dragging and guiding your icing. That's how you get these nice, beautiful lines. And I'm going in and I am flooding the cookie here. You can already tell that my flood is pretty thick here, but this is exactly what I wanted for these smaller cookies. I'm going to be honest here with this design. This actually ended up infinitely simpler than I had originally planned, and that's okay. With minis, the theme here is kiss. Keep it simple, silly, or another word, but kiss. Keep it simple, really. You're going to do yourself a favor, and they're small, so they look adorable even when they're simple. So I'm using a medium peak piping consistency here just to do a couple of accents to kind of define the shape. So you know that's the base of the gravy boat, that's the handle. And then for my kitschy little addition here, I decided to do some dripping gravy. This is, I'd say, a medium peak piping consistency. And that is the gravy boat, my friends. Up next, we have the turkey leg, and this is medium peak piping consistency that I am piping the bone. I do let that crust over before I move on to the next section, which is a flood consistency. Going to flood this turkey leg. So I let that crust over pretty significantly before I move on to this next step. that is the piping consistency, and I'm using a big brush here. Now, my goal with this was to create as much texture and dimension as possible. And the way that you do that with this technique is you use a piping consistency on the thicker end. So this is a medium peak, and you use a lot of it, and you just dab it like crazy. Like, you see what I'm doing? I'm doing these, once I get it covered, I'm going back and I'm doing these kind of bigger taps so I can get these bigger peaks as it's starting to crust ever so slightly. And here's something you don't see me do on Instagram videos because I cut this out. Who wants to watch this? But this is what I do on every cookie, is I go around and I make sure that all of the edges are covered. I go back over and make sure it has the texture I want, and there we have the beautiful turkey leg. Up next is the pumpkin pie, the classic. Again, outlining and flooding with a single consistency here. I'm letting that crust over. This is actually the flood consistency. I'm doing the same technique as I did with the turkey leg, but I wanted very, very little dimension and texture. So you can see that when you use flood consistency, you don't get quite as much texture. I also didn't use very much, which is going to help make it just ever so slight, which is the perfect look that I was going for with this pumpkin pie. I'm doing flooding in sections here, which means that I let that first section crust over before I move on to the next, and that's what gives it that line separation in between the two. It's a nice thing to do just to add something extra to your design. And then this is just a super simple medium peak crust here with a normal open tip. Voila. And then last but not least, a little bit of whipped cream. I didn't actually use white for this set. It's amazing. So this is like a cream off-white. And there's the pumpkin pie. Here we go with the cherry pie. This can be messy. This does not need to be perfect. I'm doing some pressure piping here, which means that I'm varying the pressure on my bag. So I'm doing more pressure to get the big bead out, releasing pressure, more pressure, releasing pressure. You could do this much more neatly and make it look like perfect little balls, but ain't got time for that, people. Ain't got time. So I'm doing this kind of faster, just connecting them all. It's fine. It's medium peak, so it's kind of maintaining enough of integrity on its own. Here I am, again, pressure piping, big bead of pressure, release the pressure. I let the red crust over, and now I am going in and I am flooding the crust on here. Pretty proud of this design. I think it looks pretty cool with the little beads of red poking through in the middle. Again, I let that crust over, pun intended, and here I am piping the crust, same as the pumpkin pie, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. There's the cherry pie. Woot woot. Up next we have one of the leaves. This one is going to be wheat. I'm using my off-white creamy color to outline and flood. You can see I'm lifting my bag here to get these nice lines. I'm dropping down and touching on each corner to get a good shape. So I let that crust over before moving on to the detail piping. This is a medium peak consistency. And I'm first piping my lines with this consistent pressure on my bag, and now I'm going to do a little bit of pressure piping. So it's kind of like what I was doing with the cranberries, where I start with a big bead of pressure and then I release pressure and I pull at the same time. This is kind of hard to see at this angle, but there we go. You can see it better with these, that there's kind of a little bit of a tip at the end, and this is the effect I'm going for to kind of make it look like wheat instead of just straight balls of icing. So you'll see here in a second, I'm going to move the cookie so it's at a better angle for me. I'm always an advocate of moving the cookie to the angle that is best for you to decorate. Most people learn how to decorate certain things at a certain angle. So do yourself a favor, move the cookie. That was the wheat. Here we are moving on to the cranberry. If you missed the flood from the wheat, go back one. This again is a medium peak to do the stems. When I made this, I was originally thinking that these were like cranberry leaves, bushes, but I guess this could also be a cherry tree. It still goes with the theme, whatever you want it to be. It's a cookie. It's cute. I'm doing the same technique here on the leaves that I did with the wheat. So this is pressure piping, bead of pressure, release, bead of pressure, release. I didn't wait for the stems to dry in this case when I was doing them en masse. I did let them dry. If you're doing a lot, I suggest doing one thing at a time. So do all the stems first, then do all the green, then do all the red. So here I am just piping red beads, not terribly neatly. It's fine, it's cute, it's small. This cookie is about 2 inches long. That's not a very big cookie. So it's small, it's adorable. Whatever you do, it's gonna look cute, I promise. So there's the cherry / cranberry leaf tree bush thing. Up next, we have the corn. This was another design that ended up much simpler than I had sketched out, and I'm okay with it because I really like how it ended up. There's something to be said about keeping things simple, and sometimes it's actually a lot harder to keep it simple than to detail it up. I allowed that to crust over before I go through with my medium peak piping consistency to do the detail. This might actually be more like a soft peak. Anywhere from a soft to a medium peak is fine with this detail work. This here is more on this closer to a medium peak, and I'm just pressure piping dots. And much like I did with the cherry pie, it's not super neat. I'm kind of connecting them together, which I think looks totally fine. It's in the name of sanity here, people. I don't have time. I don't have the patience to individually pipe each dot perfectly. I like the texture. It looks great. Moving on to the cranberries. And this may look like a simple cookie, but goodness, this was actually kind of a pain because I'm flooding this in sections. So this ended up being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps, I think, in all, because I'm letting each section crust before moving on to the next one. So why did I add this little dot in the middle? I am using flood consistency here on the red, and the dot is a piping consistency, and it's meant to help give it more structure so that it doesn't crater in the middle. But to be honest, my dot was a little too big. On some of these, you can actually see the dot kind of poking through. If I were to do this again, I think I would have rather just used a soft peak piping consistency and pressure piped these dots instead of using the flood like I'm doing here. that would have actually saved me another consistency. So just something to keep in mind for future. Everyone's learning, even the so-called masters. So you can see the dot is kind of still poking through, and I'm like, should I use my scribe? Should I not use my scribe? And then I ultimately decide, you'll see in a second, to use my scribe to kind of help it all blend and meld together. So I let that crust over again. I'm using piping consistency for the leaves. Again, I think I could have just used a soft peak, but this was good enough. I have a dehydrator, so I popped these babies right in the dehydrator, did like 4 at a time. The dehydrator helps them set faster so that it helps to reduce the appearance of craters. Once that last bit had crusted over, now I'm going in with my medium peak and I'm piping the details here. Just something cute and simple. And there we have it. There is the little cranberry cluster. So the last few cookies we're going to do here are the 3 plaque cookies, and I'm just doing a simple outline and flood here with a single consistency again. I love this shape from Kaleidacuts. It's the Nancy plaque, one of her absolute best, I think probably also all-time sellers. This is the smallest mini size in, again, 2 inches. It's so cute, it's so small, it's so perfect. So once that crusted over nicely, I'm using my projector to do the lettering. For this kind of single thickness lettering, I like to use a medium peak, closer to a medium peak. I just think it needs a little bit more control, and I think it's helped by a medium peak, but you could also get away with more like a soft peak. I will link in the description of this video the projector that I use. This kind of lettering, it's all about what I was saying earlier with keeping your bag off the cookie and just guiding it. Guiding it along. See, I'm lifting my bag to get these nice long lines. Of course, touching down when you need to. But it's very meditative, I think, to do this kind of lettering. The last one is my absolute favorite, and I will tell you why when we get there. So the reason this one was my favorite to pipe was because I only have to touch down once in the middle of the word. So the rest of it is just one continuous line. And it just makes me so happy to watch it. This is kind of hard to do because you have to really master the amount of pressure out of your bag and the speed that you're moving your bag. It's real comfort with the icing, and I'm applying a consistent pressure here. I think for a lot of beginners, that's a really hard concept, how much pressure to apply on the bag. So those are the little plaques, and that is the entire set, my friends. Hope you have fun making it yourself.